So, hello and welcome to the second episode of the Abundant Living Ecuador podcast. We hope to get into some areas of interest for you today, including cost of living, some investment ideas, things that people are interested in. People are calling us for in terms of properties, growing food, self-sufficiency, permaculture, those kinds of things. And we have we have some interviews that we've scheduled for the upcoming podcast as well to give you a fresh perspective from expats who have settled in Loja, Vilcabamba, the surrounding areas. So we hope you'll find that interesting in the future. I am Jesse Bayer, flanked by my partner in crime, Darnell Dunn. And we're the co-founders of Abundant Living Ecuador. So welcome to episode number 2.
We're in a studio today, actually, as well.
Yes.
So the sound quality will be much better than the last one.
Yes. Forgive the squeaks and lousy quality of episode number 1. We have remedied that. We are in a radio recording studio today, which we've rented out for $30 an episode. I'll jump into the cost of living stuff right there. I think that's a little cheaper than it would be certainly in New York or Boston where we came from. But
absolutely.
I get to start today's episode actually with one of Darnell's favorite things, which is "I told you so." So
that's a great segue, Jesse. Great segue.
So I was called out on on our podcast, which I think so far 8 people have listened to as of today. So my secret is safe, or our secret is safe. But I was called out by Darnell, not knowing what my daughter's age was when I moved to Ecuador. Vindication. I was in fact correct. She was 5 years old. So I told you so, which I don't actually enjoy that much, but Darnell does so for his benefit. So getting right into it, Darnell, what do you want to start with?
Let's start with self-sufficiency. A lot of people have been calling specifically about that from all over the world. We've had people call from California, Southern California, where actually right now they've got businesses popping up where instead of watering your lawn because of all the water bans, you can have someone come over and spray paint your lawn for you.
Where were they? It was San Diego?
Yeah, San Diego. Right. Spray paint your lawn for you. You even get to pick the color green.
Yes. You can see how far things have degraded when, you're spray painting green on your grass, to have a lawn.
Yeah. So people calling from California, people calling from Sweden, people calling from Seattle. Had somebody call from Seattle earlier this week looking for large pieces of land where they could grow their own food and potentially set up, buy a large enough piece of land, where they can, subdivide it and sell it to other people with farmland all set up and ready to plant. So that's something that people have been asking us about. So I figured we could talk a little bit about land that we found, land prices, some characteristics of land that people can expect to find in this part of the country, and anything else you wanted to cover.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a lot of people who are looking at Ecuador, at least this part of Ecuador, one of the reasons they're looking is to grow food. And I am far from an expert in growing food. We have plans to grow food here, but have yet to venture into that world. But just from having traveled around, talked to people, and been here for a long time, it seems to me to be one of the best places in the world to grow food. The size of the food you can grow is magnificent. The soil is very mineralized. There's water everywhere. The water is of a fantastic quality. So it's really a great place to grow food. And I know a lot of people looking at here are interested in things like permaculture, interested in things like self-sufficiency. From a climate, food growing perspective, I think, you're really in the right place. I think one of the issues that people run into back home and that people are thinking about who are interested in those kinds of things is, is the government going to mess with me in terms of the things I'm trying to do? I read stories from the States where, towns and cities and even states are banning, collecting rainwater, or they're having, they're making it illegal to live off grid, to not plug into, the city utility systems and so forth. In any rural area here, you don't have any of those issues. So I think that's another important point for people who are interested in those kinds of things. In Vilcabamba, which is a town 45 minutes outside of Loja, there's a large expat community who are really interested in those kinds of things. So if you're looking for resources in terms of permaculture, in terms of growing food, and then of course Ecuadorians almost all grow food who don't live in the city. So there's definitely a lot of resources for those kinds of things here, and a fantastic, climate, soil, water situation as well.
Right. One thing too that makes a lot of sense too is, even as good as the soil is, there's some things that don't grow in certain climates. And I think the unique thing about Loja compared to other places in the mountains in Ecuador is the fact that you're close to so many different climates. So if there's something that you can grow in Loja, more than likely you'll be able to grow it in Vilcabamba or another climate that's very close to that. So anything within an hour of here, it's safe to say that you can grow just about any kind of crop you like.
Yeah, which is really cool. I mean, I at the market that I shop on Sundays, there's a large indigenous contingent who sells non-sprayed, non-chemical, they don't use pesticides, food, and they're largely from Saraguro, which is a town an hour and a half. I drive fast.
Yeah. Hour if you're driving, for sure.
A little more than an hour from Loja. And it's a little higher. I don't know the elevation off the top of my head.
I don't know it exactly, but it's higher than here for sure.
Maybe 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet higher.
Something like that.
Anyhow, so it's a cooler climate as a result of being higher. They grow things like apples there, which is really cool. So I can get my organic apples from an hour and change away in Saraguro. Whereas if and there's other climates even quite a bit closer actually than Saraguro where you can grow all the tropical stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, to your point, you're within a pretty short distance from the ability to grow anything. I don't think there's anything that you couldn't grow within an hour and a half of Loja, for example.
Yeah. Also, something that has often come up a little bit too, Jesse, is people looking before they get set up planting their fruits and vegetables. How do they where can they get organic food before they get set up?
Right. Yeah, and there's interesting options there in this part of Ecuador. It's a little harder on the coast where they do heavily spray things, and I don't want to give the wrong impression. Ecuador is not a organic paradise or anything like that. But certainly the indigenous largely don't use chemicals, and many of the foreigners in Ecuador also don't spray their food. So yeah, and a permaculture community as we touched on. One of the interesting things that I think last week we were talking about taxi prices. And we were mentioning that most of the city is $1 in a taxi ride. Well, that went up. It may have even been a day or two before we recorded. I'm not sure, but it went up in the last week and a half. The minimum taxi ride is now $1.25, and of course, by Western standards, that's still extraordinarily cheap. But it brings up an interesting point as far as inflation. Ecuador is dollarized. Ecuador is on the U.S. dollar, so in a sense, it's tied to the performance of the dollar as far as inflation, and in a sense, it's not. And we can get into that. But we've been here, over 2 years now. We've seen some significant inflation in terms of the costs of everyday things like taxi rides, bus rides, lunch, etc. I mean, I think lunch was, on average, or median price was probably closer to $1.75 or $2 when we got here. Now I'd say median price is between $2.50 and $3.
Right.
So that's a big percentage increase in 2+ years.
Yeah. Not to mention with taxis, after 7, the minimum is $1.40 now.
Okay.
I was going to Supermaxi last night to pick up a couple of things, and the guy was like, "Oh, it's 7:00. It's 1:40 now." I'm like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
which, obviously we're not bringing that up to scare you about prices. $1.40 is a very
Yeah,
cheap,
right.
very cheap taxi
it's
ride, but it's a big
40% increase.
Yeah, right.
25 to 40% increase. The newspaper, which is kind of strange because everybody still reads the newspaper here.
Right.
And you had the main newspaper in Loja go up recently, I don't know, within the last 6 months, from 50 cents an issue to 75 cents an issue. I mean, that's a 50% price increase.
Huge percentage increase, yeah.
So, and it's kind of funny. I think it tells you the kind of place we're in where the consumption of a good doesn't drop at all when you raise the price by 50%. The same amount of people still buy the paper.
Right. No dip in circulation at all. Yeah. So, price is very cheap, but certainly there's some inflation in Ecuador. And I think part of that is the tax codes.
The tax code, I'd say also the fact that, this is something I think a lot of people don't know. I certainly didn't know it until being, at least a year here, that Ecuador is the smallest producing member of OPEC. So, with oil prices being down so much year over year, that's decreased significantly the amount of money that the government brings into the coffers, and as a result, they're cutting spending and getting rid of subsidies on certain things, and that certainly has an impact on the amount of money that's in circulation here.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I think part of that is tied to the tax code as well, in the sense that as revenues dry up in whatever sense, taxes tend to go up, and unfortunately. So yeah, this government is taxed. They have what I would describe as an overbearing tax structure. Are there ways around it? Is it so overbearing you can't be successful or run a business? No, but import taxes, as we touched on last week, are extremely high.
And that was actually as a result of falling oil revenue that they added those tariffs.
Yeah. Now, I recently, and I hope I don't scare people too much, but I recently went to renew the registration on my truck. The truck was around $36,000 brand new. Part of the reason it was that cost was a lot of the truck is actually made in Ecuador, so theoretically it doesn't have a huge amount of import taxes built into the price, but many of the parts are made outside of the country, so there's still a good amount of import taxes built into the price, and then there's a 12% value-added tax in Ecuador. So anyway, I paid around $36,000 for a brand new truck 2+ years ago. They have a system of registration here, and I went to go pay it, and my bill, the lady told me $3,000. And I thought she screwed up. I asked her, "You mean 300?" She said, "No, 3,000." I said, "Well, what do you mean? That's not a normal price for, renewing the registration of a truck." And 20 minutes later, I had the table in my hand of taxes on automobiles, and it answered a question for me that I had previously, as to why all these people I knew who ran businesses, had a lot of money, were successful people in Ecuador, were driving, cars that were just middle of the road cars. And I found out Ecuador has, a ridiculous tax on cars. So you're actually paying by the year, and I hadn't paid in 2 years. So in my 2-year,
well, that's also kind of funny as well too. I mean, who back home could not pay their excise tax or some other tax, or
drive an expired registration car, right?
An extra year. And how many times I got pulled over in your car, I just said, "Oh, it's somebody else's car, no problem." They let me go.
Right. Yeah.
You got pulled over a couple times, and maybe slipped a guy a 20 or something like that, and that was the end of it.
I did unfortunately have to do that one time as well. Yeah. So I mean, $3,000 to drive. Like I didn't have $3,000 when they asked me at that time. It was not. So there are things like that, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the economy. It makes it harder to do business. It makes it harder to live life. And so those things are here. I don't want anybody running here thinking it's a utopian libertarian type paradise. It is definitely not.
Because that's what we did.
That's kind of what we thought. Yeah, right. We were misguided in our research somewhat when we came here, thinking that it was more of a libertarian culture than it is, and maybe some of the cultural stuff is that way, but the government currently is not. So that's something to keep in mind thinking about Ecuador. Now, does that put a damper on the opportunities that are here? No, and in fact, in a certain way, it makes them greater because there's business interests that are potentially scared off by some of the structures of the government, and as a result, you're in a country that has really just a very limited amount of capital for business and investment. So your opportunities for that reason are really great here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing is that it's just a very small country that people don't know a lot about in general. I mean, did you know the Galapagos Islands were part of Ecuador before you moved here?
No, right.
Exactly.
I didn't. No.
And, there was, when I was leaving work and resigning, people that I spoke to, I was telling them I was moving to Ecuador. They didn't know what it was or where it was. They were like, oh, is that in Africa somewhere? Or?
Right. Central America. I got a lot of Central America.
Yeah. I got a lot of Africa, but maybe.
Right. Different cultures.
Oh, geez. Okay. So I think that gives people a pretty good idea of inflation and, a little bit about self-sufficiency. What else should we touch on today?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most people researching Ecuador, they're probably looking at a lot of different places within the country. I think we did the same thing. We traveled the majority of Ecuador. Since then, we've between the two of us, we've seen just about the entire country. I think it'd be good to touch on regions and also specific cities and towns within Ecuador. If you're looking at Ecuador, there's kind of 3 or 4 regions really in terms of the characteristics that divide them. So northern Ecuador is more populated than southern Ecuador. Northern Ecuador also has a volcano. So we ruled out the north as a result of the volcano and the population. But I mean, I think both you and I really like the north. Mm-hmm. I think Quito's an interesting. It's a little cold, but it's a nice city. And there's areas within a couple of hours of Quito that are also beautiful areas with interesting climates and interesting characteristics. There's amazing indigenous towns and huge markets. There's all kinds of interesting stuff in the north. If you're looking for the structural safety, though, in terms of fault lines and volcanoes and those kinds of things, it's not the place to be. There was a Cotopaxi. There's a volcano, Cotopaxi, that recently erupted to some small eruption, but recently erupted.
But they are talking about it now. Is some scientists are saying the pressure is building up, and there could be another eruption coming fairly soon, or in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and they were evacuating towns even from the small eruptions, and there was crop failures in the area. So we're on the other side of the country for that, partly for those reasons.
But that's the area. I mean, if we're talking about regions, certainly, Quito, Ambato, Latacunga is much more like here because those are all places in the Andes mountain range. So, you might have differences in temperature for elevation, but for the most part, they're fairly similar.
Yeah.
Whereas, you've got the Amazonian region where you get down, in between the eastern half of Peru and in Ecuador, where you've got in the Andes region where you have really, a temperature that you would associate with rainforest. I mean, it's very, rains about the same amount year round, very lush, very green, lots of insects, lots of humidity. But the least populated part of the country, it makes up about 50% of the land area of Ecuador, but only has about 3% of the population. You have a lot of national parks there, very cool place, but, certainly for somebody who's looking for that, and that's not everybody. Yeah. And then on the other side of the Andes region, you have the Pacific coastline where, you have a lot of big cities. That's really where a lot of foreigners have been going because, most people who are looking to relocate, want to go to a place where they can, be at the beach all the time and, get access to, some of the cheapest coastline that you can find in South America. I mean, I would say it's cheap for a reason, but it's still the beach and still great. I enjoy going there. Yeah. What cities did you like most about the coast?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. The Ecuador has a huge, jungle region, a huge Amazonian region. So if you're looking for that, it's certainly here, and it's here at a really good price and with great road access. You're going to deal with, as you said, a little more humidity, a little more heat, some more bugs, those kinds of things, as I think you would in any, jungle Amazonian kind of region. But it's a sweet area. I think it's, as you said, 50% of the country, 3% of the population. Yeah. So, if you're looking to be remote, also it's really good for that reason.
Yeah, talk about self-sufficiency.
Right.
And because there's so little population compared to the land available, those supply-demand dynamics are certainly in anybody's favor who's looking to buy there.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's cheaper than the rest of the country. You can get large fincas for $100,000 and under there, which you can't anywhere else in the country. Well, fincas are just a term they use here for large pieces of land. In terms of the coast, I haven't seen the whole coast. I've seen probably 60-70% of it. Salinas is a nice town for vacationing. It's considered the I don't know if it is the nicest beach in Ecuador, but it's certainly considered by a lot of Ecuadorians to be the go-to vacation spot. It's about an hour and a half from Guayaquil, the largest city in Ecuador. And it's enjoyable. It's probably the closest thing you'll get in Ecuador to a sort of what you would expect from a beach town internationally. So nice restaurants, nice bars, nice clubs, nice beach,
They have a yacht
boardwalk.
club there.
They have a yacht club, boardwalk, a lot of luxury buildings. And it's pretty cheap. So, if you're looking for a decent place to, be on the beach.
Lots of people at the beach trying to sell you stuff.
Lots of people trying to sell you stuff. Although not aggressively, which is interesting. That kind of feeds into the, some of the cultural stuff. It's like if you've been to, a tourist beach, for example, in Jamaica or other places, the spiel is much more aggressive in those kind of places than it would be here. You'd be more likely here to get a longing look of like please than you would be to get any sort of like ongoing attempt to get you to buy verbally. So an interesting thing. But Salinas is a nice town. A lot of people have been to Montanita. Also an interesting town. I kind of like Alone a little bit better, which is 10 minutes north or so, 15 minutes north of Montanita. Montanita is kind of it's an international town. It's got more of a kind of hippie feel to it.
And great mixed drinks.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, we were originally traveling. I don't, I don't drink sweet drinks, but gosh, these guys were making these mixed drinks on the beach in Montanita. They were, they make them with fruit that's actually fruit. You order something with pineapple in it, the guy's cutting up the pineapple. You're just not used to that coming from the States. So
and the pineapples, the native pineapples here are really, really good. Those white pineapples that are not very acidic.
Right.
Really tasty, really sweet. But like a natural sweetness as opposed to that kind of artificial sweetness that you kind of get with the yellow pineapple from Hawaii. Montanita was okay.
Yeah.
It was okay. I really like the beaches in Esmeraldas personally. I know you didn't get a chance to go with me. You were handling some business here, but I got a chance to see a lot of Esmeraldas. It's on a border with Colombia and also has Ecuador's largest oil refinery. And there's a little bit, compared to the rest of Ecuador, I would say that the infrastructure is definitely a cut below. And for that, you've got much cheaper land there. But at the same time, it's the majority of the Ecuadorian coast is fairly arid, fairly dry. Whereas Esmeraldas has the only consistent source of fresh water that gets to the land. So it's much more lush there. The beaches are much nicer, in my opinion, and it's relatively cheaper than the other coastline that you can find, for example, in Manabí, where you have Manta, where you have a lot more industry, where you've got other places that that foreigners are going, like Puerto Lopez, just cheaper in comparison, and I think just a better quality of beach. But the province of Manabí, which is south of the province of Esmeraldas, just has better infrastructure, and I think you're kind of just picking which one you would prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you describing the northern coast in Ecuador around Esmeraldas as sort of almost being like you're in the jungle and then you're on the beach.
Right.
Which is cool. If you're, so you can be up in green growth and all that kind of stuff and then be on the beach, which is,
right.
It's a great combination. Whereas, as you mentioned, a lot of the coast feels like desert. If you're in Manta, for example, there's just no water. There's nothing's growing.
Right.
I like Manta. It's a city I enjoy, but in terms of, it's not a place I'd want to settle, and it's not a place for me that, in terms of beachfront, is what I'm looking for, because it is so desert-like.
Right. Yeah, it's the beach is, certainly I wouldn't discourage anybody who really wants the beach, and Ecuador is a great country to be, I think, no matter where you are, essentially. But it's not something that you would associate with, top-end, high-quality beachfront property. It kind of reminds me of the beaches back home in New England. Right. Like, going to the beach in, Newport, or going to the beach in what's that, like Hampton Beach or something like that. Yeah. Just nothing to write home about. It's right. Close, so you go.
Right. That being said, you can get a condo on the beach for, $130,000 or $70,000 or, $180,000 or whatever, depending on, obviously the quality and luxury of the building. But,
right.
So it's attractive for that reason. But yeah, I mean, you're not talking about white sand and turquoise water.
Right. And then also too, I mean, if you're talking about the places that are attracting foreigners on the coast, places like, Puerto Lopez or Olón or Bahia or Canoa. Yeah, or Salinas. I mean, the land prices there are just, you can't get a quality property for that price. Maybe you can buy the land for that, and then you got to deal with construction costs.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen condos in Salinas that were very close to the beach, if not on the beach, for well under $200,000.
Really?
Okay. Maybe not in brand new buildings or but decent. But yeah, if you're talking luxury in those places, like real luxury, U.S. style luxury or world style luxury, you're talking you're talking prices that are equivalent to what you would pay, anywhere in the world, really. So, I mean, I know a guy who's selling $1 million condo, for example, a penthouse condo in Salinas. It's nice, but it's up for $1 million. You could get that other places. It's not necessarily priced at a discount versus some other place. That condo in the Bahamas may not be much more than that.
Right.
For example.
And then you have the connectivity issue as well too. I mean, it's not like Salinas is you got to drive an hour and a half to the airport. To an international airport from there. Maybe close to 2 hours. I don't know. I haven't been.
Yeah, about an hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
If I'm driving. So, I mean, you mentioned earlier fruit. I think we mentioned this in the last episode, but I think we've been here for a long time at this point. You start to just grow accustomed and take for granted the things that are here. The fruit here it's just not similar to the fruit that you would get in the States. And I don't care where you are in the States. I've traveled a good portion of the country. It's just incredible. And there's probably 30 varieties of fruit that I've had in Ecuador, maybe 25 of which I loved, that I had never seen before. Didn't know the name, didn't know what they were, didn't know how to eat them. People, you have to figure out how to eat them. I mean, I think... you remember when the first time you had a grenadine?
Right. Like, I didn't know that was a real fruit. I just thought it was...
like in a drink or something, yeah. Right. And they're delicious. And
really
and there's just so many fruits like that. What is that? I forget the name of that very long green fruit with the black seeds and the white meat inside.
Oh, you know what? I was just thinking about this when you brought this conversation up. So I forget the name of them, but it's almost like it's like the texture of cotton candy, but it kind of tastes like banana.
Yeah, and it's just delicious.
Yeah, I forget what it's called.
And all these fruits. I mean, you can get the way mostly you can buy bananas individually here, but if you're buying bananas from anybody who's growing them locally, which is a good percentage of the bananas that you'd find, they're cut in such a way that it's kind of like a tree, or not a tree, they're cut off like a branch of the banana. So you've got maybe 20, 30, 50, 70 bananas growing out of this branch that has been cut off the banana tree, and that's how you're purchasing it. And you're getting that for pineapples out of this world, any kind of fruit. I like coconut water a lot. It's a healthy and hydrating fruit,
and also very expensive back home.
Very expensive. I mean, I was paying like $7 for maybe a quart or something of coconut water in New York back home. And yeah, I mean, you just buy the coconuts here.
Right.
You just buy the coconuts, and they're $1 at the Sunday market. Well, yeah. We had our we were like we said, we're in a studio here, yeah. So our technician was nice enough to give us the name of the fruit. Guava is the long green fruit with the white meat and the black seeds in it. But yeah, the fruits here just really stand out to me as just such a perk. I mean, you can go to the markets here, and you can get a fresh squeezed. I mean, you watch the lady squeezing it. You get a fresh made juice of any imaginable fruit that you can think of, and many you can't think of because you had never seen them before. And the price would be somewhere between 75 cents and like maybe $2 if you were putting lots of different kinds of fruits in there. Right. I often get like a fresh squeezed carrot juice. It's $1, $1.25, or $1.50 at the most, depending on where I buy it from. You're talking like, I don't know, 20 or 30 carrots that go into
right.
Making that juice. So those things are really some of the cool things I think about living here.
Yeah, speaking of food, let's talk a little bit about we touched on it earlier about cost of living. You've got your daughter that's with you. How much does it cost for you for you guys to eat as a family in a given week?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an exact number. I think it's somewhere. I do all my shopping on Sundays at this open air market they have in Loja. It's an amazing market. I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of vendors. Some who buy their food from the coast and bring it, and then a lot who grow their food locally and just bring it to sell. For a week for a family of 3, I'd be somewhere between, at the lowest end, maybe $20, at the highest end, maybe $60. Mm-hmm. And I buy, that includes 20 to 30 coconuts that I buy for the week at $1 each. I don't buy a lot of meat. That's a little more expensive. If you're buying seafood, that's also a little more expensive. So, I mean, if you were eating meat and seafood every day, you could add a little bit to that number. I mean, for example, a chicken here is not less than a chicken back home, or not much less.
Not much less. I mean, a whole chicken you can get like a 6 or 7 pound chicken for about $10 or so.
About $10. Yeah, and if you want a what they call criolla, or a chicken that's not been shot up with hormones and been fed, generally just corn is usually what people feed them. So a local person who's just, you're going to be more like 12 would be your bottom line number. Usually you'd be closer to 20.
20, yeah. So that's definitely in line with prices back home.
Yeah, so if meat, seafood is not super cheap, although some of it is probably cheaper than you'd pay in the States. Fruits and vegetables are ridiculously cheap. Yeah. If that's what the bulk of what you're buying, you're just 10 cents will get you lots of things.
Right. Yeah, I was at the market, same Sunday market. Obviously, I shop at it as well too. I was kind of thinking about this topic throughout the week, and so I paid a little bit closer attention to what I was buying and how much it cost. So I'll buy I go and buy some potatoes. So you go and get some fresh potatoes at the market. You pay you get for $1 maybe. Depending on the type of potato, 3 to 5 pounds of potatoes for $1.
$1, right?
A pineapple for $1. A big head of broccoli for 75 cents.
I mean, if the pineapples are small, you're getting 3 for $1.
Right. certain things like that would be expensive back home are going to be more expensive here. Fruits like strawberries or mangoes or things like that. Even though they grow here, they're, slightly more pricey, but during mango season, you might get, 2 for $1 or something like that.
Yeah, at least during mango season, you could do better than that. While like they're, that's the interesting thing is the prices really change here by what's available.
Right.
So if you're buying mangoes from the coast when it's not mango season, they might be 4 times more expensive than when you're buying them when everybody's pulling their mangoes off the tree in the local area.
Right. Yeah, you might pay as much as $2.50, $3 for one mango during off season.
Off season. Yeah, I mean, I think I've gotten as many even as 5 mangoes for $1 when it was the height of mango season. I have a friend even who he buys them by the box and then freezes them when it's mango season because he can get them all locally organic and cheap, during that time, and then he uses them for various foods, whatever he uses them for throughout the year when it's not mango season. When ordinarily you'd have to be buying them from the coast at that time.
Right, and then even with oranges as well too, it's like that.
Big changes.
Because you can get oranges all year round, but off season it's like maybe 8 for $1, and during the season you can get them for like $20, $25 $1 depending on what
even 30. Yeah, I mean it's really, I mean, it's fun. 30 juicing oranges, locally grown, organic for $1. I mean, it's like it's hard. I mean, it's like hard to carry the bag out, and you paid $1. It's really, those are definitely some of the perks here.
Bananas as well too. That's something I didn't know when I came here. Ecuador is the largest exporter of bananas in the world.
Right.
They produce something like 29% of the world's of the bananas on the world market. So yeah, I mean, any time of year you're getting bananas very cheap.
Right, and those also you have the choice, of buying them from the coast or buying them locally. And that's the other thing is, for oranges, bananas, lemons, a lot of the fruits that are grown locally, nobody sprays, not because they're ideologically opposed to spraying. There's just no need.
Right.
The fruit just grows so well naturally. Anybody that's growing oranges within an hour of Loja is not spraying them.
Right. Well, because too we're above the insect line basically. I mean, there's not very many insects that are flying around at this altitude.
True. Getting back for a second to regions. We ended up in the mountains. We ended up in the mountains in the south for some of the natural disaster reasons that we spoke about. Also for climate reasons. You got year-round warmth here, and in terms of microclimate, you can find anything that you're looking for as far as year-round temperature, rainfall, humidity levels, those kinds of things. Most of the mountains are are not humid. Even in places like Loja, where it rains a good amount, it's not humid at all. We touched on the Amazon, or in the jungle. Obviously, it's much more humid there, and that is the mountains. But as far as the Sierra, as far as what they consider the mountains, it's generally not a humid area at all. A lot of people come to Vilcabamba. I think that's an interesting town. It's a town that gets international publicity. Vilcabamba is interesting because it's one of the only places in this area, in the Loja area, within a couple of hours of Loja, that has an expat community.
Right.
So a lot of expats are there. You've got English-speaking expats from all over the world. You've got the kind of restaurants that you would expect to find anywhere else in the world in any international city. And it's a very small town. I mean, it's like something like 5,000 people.
Right, with 500 foreigners. Give or take.
It might be, I'm not positive the number. I think it's higher than that. But a lot. So, you've got for example, a great French bakery in Vilcabamba. You can't find bread anywhere in Ecuador really that is as you would want it if you're not buying it just, for example, at the supermarket back home. If you're looking for anything above supermarket quality bread back home, it's hard to find in Ecuador.
Right. Unless it's another person from France who moved here who's making bread.
Right. Which there isn't not many of, at least in this part of Ecuador. I mean, if you're in Quito, I'm sure you could find it. If you're in Guayaquil, I'm sure you could find it. If you're in many places on the coast, in Cuenca, definitely in Cuenca.
Right. I mean, I went to La Tacunga once, and there was a guy from Belgium, of French descent, who had a bakery there, and bread was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, we took a bus, an overnight bus, and got to La Tacunga sometime around 4:30, between 4:30 and 5:30, and my friend's dad picked us up, and we went straight to the bakery because his wife told him, you know, he better not come home without bread.
Yeah, I mean, I found in Salinas, world-class pizza. I mean, that's something I miss from New York greatly is pizza. I mean, there's a lot of pizza places in Loja. I hope no Lojano pizza place owners are listening to this podcast in English, so I'm sure they're not. But you know, there's a lot of pizza places in Loja and in Vilcabamba as well. They're all just garbage if you're coming from Italy or New York or any place that has good pizza. You know, if there's a guy in Salinas making pizza that would be on my top 5 or top 10 pizza place list, you know, back home. So you will find that in other places, not as much in the areas that we are because there's less foreigners.
Yeah, I mean, we had a group in last week, was it? Yeah, last Friday from Ecuador Expats Journey. They do tours around Ecuador like 6 times a year or something like that, and we had they asked us to speak at a lunch that they had, and we were answering questions about you know what people who were just coming to Ecuador for the first time had, and I was explaining to them, answering some of their questions about Loja. And one of the questions I got was, you know, what's the foreign community like? What's the expat community like? And really, there's none to speak of. You know, maybe the two of us have noticed an increase of maybe, you know, 100% over the last 2 years, which would bring, you know, the grand total up to maybe 100.
Right.
Potentially.
Right. Yeah, right. But, you know, that being said, one of the things, you know, we've noticed about Loja, which we expected when we came here, but one of the things we've noticed about Loja is the city's really changing. You know,
Absolutely.
Just in the couple of years that we've been here, the amount of new boutique shops, restaurants, bars, clothing stores, etc., have increased a dramatic amount. You know, a friend of ours who's from France, you know, recently opened 2 restaurants in Loja, and that's just kind of indicative of the kind of changes that are taking place. I mean, there's probably 10 restaurants that have opened in the last 6 months that they're really pretty. They're like the kind of restaurants you get in a neighborhood, you know, in a city back home when the neighborhood is starting to gentrify, is starting to change in that kind of way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's got all of those sort of signals. You know, you've got, you know, yoga studios popping up. You've got, you know, as you talked about, new restaurants with new concepts, doing things differently. You know, you've got some new plans to, you know, beautify the city with, you know, new roads and streets and bridges and, you know, those kinds of things. So those are all the kinds of signs that you see. You know, these are the ones that you kind of described to me as things that you saw in Brooklyn before you purchased your brownstones. Yeah.
No, I feel like, you know, having watched neighborhoods gentrify in New York, I feel like we're kind of in that same mode here in Loja. It's got a lot, for example, it's got a lot of what Cuenca has to offer. There's certainly some that it doesn't have in terms of what Cuenca has to offer, but it has a lot of what Cuenca has to offer, and Cuenca has a gigantic and thriving expat community. As a result, prices are higher, those kinds of things. Loja is being discovered now, and it has a lot to offer in those kinds of ways. I mean, I think it's really, you know, if you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, I know I mentioned, you know, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, but for whatever reason in Loja, Ecuadorians don't value the land that's up above the city the same way that they value the land that's down in the city. So there's all this land that's up in the surrounding areas. I shouldn't say surrounding areas, in the valley, but up high, because Loja is in a valley with mountains surrounding it. So in that same valley, in terms of where the mountains and where Loja is, but up higher into the mountains that look down on Loja, within the city limits, though, for the most part. And that land is just, it's not valued for whatever reason by Ecuadorians the same way, but for foreigners, it's probably the most attractive land because it's outside of the city a bit. You don't have any of the air quality issues you might deal with in the city. Not that air quality here is bad at all, but it's
on a relative basis.
On a relative basis. It's a valley, so you deal with a little bit of that sort of LA syndrome in terms of whatever pollution is getting pushed out hangs a bit. But, you know, your air quality here is way better than it would be in any U.S. city pretty much. But anyways, it's a little out of the city. It has the air quality, it has the privacy. You can have a yard, those kinds of things. And that land is just really, really cheap. It's a lot cheaper than the land you'd pay in the city. And the land in the city itself is not particularly cheap. It's you're paying for a decent lot. What are you paying maybe for like a 1,000 square meter lot or something in a decent part of the city in the city.
In the city, like in the downtown area, or
maybe not right downtown, but like within what Ecuadorians would consider a reasonable distance to live from downtown.
Yeah, you could be paying as much as $200 a square meter.
Right.
Maybe even $300 a square meter in some places.
So not cheap.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And there's the interesting thing about Loja is there's not a whole lot of places to expand. Most of the valley that has a large flat areas has been exploited at this point. Right. So you have to but if you go up above the city, there's still cows and stuff like that above the city, and they're great places to build homes, great places to invest. I mean, if I had if we weren't involved in all these other things and I had a few $1 million to play with, I would buy as much of the land in the surrounding in the mountains looking down on Loja as I could and just hold it. Because in the coming years, it's going to rise in value a lot as foreigners discover this city.
Another interesting aspect of that is that there's a catalyst coming to speed that process along. They have the municipality has a plan to turn a lot of the existing center of the city into streets where you can only walk.
Oof.
So they're trying to push all the development out in those areas that you're talking about, and also north towards where that lot that we have listed where Claudia is. Mm-hmm. So, there's Supermaxi. They have plans to build one there. They're building that other large supermarket down that way. So, all the city, the development is going that way, going towards those areas that you were just talking about in the not too distant future.
And for any investor, listening to this podcast who has ideas of investing in real estate in South America, that's a fund we'd love to put together. If somebody wanted to put together a fund either to purchase land surrounding Loja, because I think that's a great investment, and we could not only find it, purchase it, manage it, etc. for you, but the other, anybody looking for arable land, if anybody was looking to put together a portfolio of arable land, this is one of the best places to do it because it's really cheap, and especially this part. That really brings me into another area, El Oro province, which we are looking to get into in the near future. It's Loja province is an amazing province. There's certainly others. El Oro might be as nice or nicer than Loja province. It's most of it is closer to the coast, yet still elevated. And the property values are not crazy there because most people who are looking for property that close to the coast are looking on the coast. So they're looking for banana plantations or, land that they can cultivate that's on the coast because it's all flat there, and that's what everybody does there.
Shrimp farming is very big out there, cacao farming. Ecuador has some of the best cacao in the world here.
Also a great business. Yeah. People are doing very well in that business. Takes some time to mature, but people are doing very well. But El Oro province, in terms of climate, proximity to the coast, and ability to grow, is as good as you're going to find anywhere.
And then also infrastructure too, because it's so flat. I mean, you can drive from one end of El Oro to the other in an hour and a half or less.
Right.
Even when you're not driving.
Right. Beautiful place. There's a town that we love called Zaruma, which I would encourage anybody to throw in Google photos and check out. It's really a lovely town. We're thinking about opening an office there in the near future to take it, to help people discover some of what what Zaruma and surrounding area has to offer. Mm-hmm. It's a great town in the Amazon too, Puyo, which I would encourage people to check out. When I had a chance to drive. If you can pull Google Maps up, you'll be oriented in what I'm saying. But I had a chance to drive from Zamora all the way to Lago Agrio, which is so basically, not all the way south, but most of the way south in the country to most of the way north in the country. It's only an hour or 2 hours from the Colombian border in Lago Agrio. one of the nicest towns I drove through was Puyo. So if you're thinking about, and that's on the Amazon, that's on the jungle side. So we discussed that a little bit earlier. So you're talking about all those characteristics, but very nice town.
Speaking of there, I took a call in the office from a guy I think who's here in Loja, who has a big piece of land there. Two different lots, one of 12 hectares and another of 24 that he's thinking about doing a project on. They had come across our page on Facebook or somewhere, maybe Plus Balia or something like that, and they wanted us to go check it out sometime next week because they'd like to work with us in the selling of the property. So we didn't get a chance to talk about that yet, but we're talking about it now.
Right. It's
an interesting area.
It's a town I'd love to be in. It's about halfway north. It probably, I don't have a map in front of me. It's probably about halfway from south to north in terms of north-south in the country, maybe.
Yeah, probably a little bit more than that, because the guy was telling me that, a little further north. He was telling me that the place that he has land is in the province of Napo, which I think is where Puyo is, and he was saying that it was 3.5 hours away from Quito.
Okay. Yeah.
So we might be talking more like 60% to 3/4 of the way up
north.
Yeah.
Boy, if Puyo's 3.5 hours from Quito, I don't know. I don't remember it being that close, but I don't live there, so. I think.
Speaking of investment ideas, something else that's I think very interesting too is we just hear from a lot of people who are looking to rent here. People who express a lot of interest in coming here to Loja, but for one reason or the other want to check it out before they settle here, which I think makes a lot of sense for anybody who's considering relocating anywhere in Ecuador or anywhere in a foreign country really that you've never been. We didn't do it that way, but our situation was a little bit different than most.
But we traveled around and saw the country.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which was I felt that was very beneficial. I think that you did too, although you didn't enjoy the trip so much. But one thing I think would be really interesting is you just don't have the quality, there's not really a rental business here like there is back home or even in places like Cuenca, which aren't too far away. And so I think it'd be really interesting for somebody to come or for us to put together a fund and rehab buildings, bring them up to Western standards, furnish them, and provide them, as short-term or long-term rentals. I think that would be a great business.
I mean, it's a great business, and the reason, and you obviously touched on this, but you're talking about a place, Loja, and Darnell's talking about doing that in Loja. You're talking about a place, Loja, that is has a rapidly increasing interest internationally, and what people are looking for internationally are furnished apartments, and outside of markets where there's a lot of foreigners, apartments and houses in Ecuador are rented out unfurnished, and what unfurnished means here is no refrigerator, no stove, nothing. So, people are coming here, they're not looking to deal with the hassles of buying a refrigerator, buying a stove, buying a television if they want a television, buying all of the furniture, to maybe live 6 months or a year. Absolutely, the apartments in Loja that are up to international standards in terms of their quality and are also furnished, they rent out for very good price and very quickly. Right. If somebody, and there's beautiful old, like colonial, I don't know if that's the right word, but very old buildings here that are being used in maybe, substandard ways that could be purchased for reasonable prices and, just as you were saying, renovated or even, small renovation and, furnished and rented out to people who are coming now.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week. What should we, I know we've got a lot of stuff on the docket. What should we leave people with before we get off this podcast?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a few new listings that we just signed. We've finished the photos and videos for. Will be coming on the website next week. We've got a hotel in Vilcabamba, which is #1 rated hotel on TripAdvisor. They're asking 1.2 million. They're profitable, and they're profitable prior to having put. They've got 2 bars, for example, in the hotel. Both of them are closed. They've got a restaurant which is closed to the public. They have a marketing budget of 0, and they're profitable running the business that way. They've chosen to run the business that way because they're more interested in, having time for themselves and family life and those kinds of things. But for somebody who wants to live in the paradise, which is Vilcabamba, and it's really maybe the nicest climate in the world, year round, 72 to 82, and just incredible beauty.
San Diego, like with water.
San Diego with water, yeah, right. You don't have to spray paint your grass. For somebody, who has experience in marketing or has experience in hotel management, you could do really, really well with this hotel. So that just came on, as well as a couple other properties that we'll be sending out via email next week. We always forget to plug ourselves, www.abecuador.com. That's A as in apple, B as in boy, Ecuador.com. We have a toll-free number, 888-999-0948. If you're in the States or in Canada, you can call us that way. You can also get a hold of us on Skype, which is on the website if you're calling from Europe and you want to touch base that way. So have a great day, great weekend, or week whenever this gets published, probably next week, and
right.
We'll be back a week from now.
All right. Take care, guys.